And with that, I wanted to again thank you all so much for being here, and I'm delighted to introduce our speaker today, Ziad Adwan. Ziad Adwan is a writer, director, and scholar whose research interests span theater histories in the Middle East, with a focus on institutions, pedagogies, and practices in both Syria and beyond. Ziad received his doctoral degree in theater studies from Royal Holloway, University of London in 2008, with a dissertation entitled Mistakes and Making Mistakes in Cultural Performances, which focused on acting styles, reception theory, and the making of stereotypes. Since then, Ziad has been with the German Research Foundation funded project Global Theater Histories, as well as the European Research Council funded project Developing Theater, where his research explored the institutionalization and professionalization of theater in the Middle East since the 1950s. He has taught courses concurrently, such as systems of rehearsal, performance theory, 20th century drama, and mass techniques at various academies across Europe and the Middle East. Ziad is also co-founder of the Tanween Collective for Performing Arts, which was founded in Damascus in 2009 and later relocated to Germany in 2013, where it received several research and performance grants. And Ziad's ongoing projects with Tanween in Berlin today include text-based theater, choreography, digital performances, and community theater. With that, I now turn the floor over to Ziad Adwan for his presentation titled Exceptional Theater in a Time of Exception, Theater Houses in Modern Syria. Thank you.
Thank you, Amina. Thank you for having me in this webinar. Thanks everyone for attending. Very glad to see new faces and actually some friends as well. The talk today will be part of what I've been doing with LMU University, Munich University. It was another ERC project on theater and institution. It was like global, the concern was global. And I took care of what we call Al-Mashraq Al-Arabi, which is the eastern part of the Arab world. So not focusing on Egypt and the what we call Al-Maghreb or Morocco or North Africa, what they call it now in Europe. Mainly my focus was on the Middle East and the Gulf area. And it was quite an interesting chance to look at details and elements and actually some facts which we never questioned back home. And today I will be focusing on Syria, and I will start with the first predicament. Mainly when I wanted to work on theater houses in Syria, I thought of working on Syria and Iraq, because both countries have similar characteristics in terms of being ruled by dictatorship, socialist dictatorship, minority ruling the majority, sectarian countries, alliance with the Soviet Union. And then I found out that Hafez Assad did not build theater houses, and Saddam Hussein built so many theater houses. So I couldn't combine those. And now I'm talking about the strategies at a totalitarian regime would undertake to establish theater as a phenomenon in the country. What were the techniques? And the main case study was what we call the Opera House, and what is actually officially called Al-Assad House, or what we call Dar, which means house. So there's a confusion between Opera House and Al-Assad House. So that was my case study, and I would start talking about theater houses in Syria. Starting from this case study, the main question was, the Opera House was ordered by Al-Assad himself back in the early 1970s to build a monument that would occupy a huge part in the center of Damascus, and then he decided not to complete it. And under this regime, So many things were built in Syria in terms of like bridges, highways, Olympic cities for sports, um, housing buildings, but the opera house was not completed. So my main question was, why did he order the construction, and why did he order not to complete it? What was happening? And it took about 30 years to open the opera house in Syria. And it was opened after he passed away and when his son succeeded him in 2004. That was when it was opened. So the order was taken early 1970s and the opening took place in 2004. So about 30 years of leaving a skeleton of a construction in the middle of the city, and no one would think about this construction, whether this construction will be completed or used by the Syrians who wants to, or by the theater goers, and it became kind of neglected in the backhead of the Syrian citizens. Okay, this is a semi-completed construction that we will never see. And to answer the question, why did he order to build it and why did he order not to complete it? I thought of thinking of the cases of the theater houses that already existed in Damascus, the capital, while the opera house was waiting to be completed. Now we're talking about theater in Syria, and it has an edgy position as a country that did not have theater tradition in the term or in the European sense. So definitely Syria had some spectacles, some performances, some folk traditional presentations, but the theater in the European thinking or the European style was not there until late 18th century, and then we have a gap, and then when Syria was liberated from France and when it became a new nation state, let's say, theater was institutionalized in the country. So we started to have national theater. We started to consider artists as, or actors mainly and directors, as a prominent slice of society that we should respect, unlike the trend before that, where the society would give bad looks to those who work in the arts and in theater, especially the actors. As we don't have theater tradition, theater houses were kind of few. In the 1940s, 1950s, the only theater houses Damascus had, for instance, were movie theaters that were converted to theater houses, and then some theater groups would use the movie theater to present their actual plays. Then the Ministry of Culture decided to rent a theater from a wealthy family, and it became the National Theater. It's called Al-Qabbani Theater, which is a small theater that hosts about 215 audience. And then it focused on another big theater, which has about 550 seats, called Al-Hamra Theater. So the Damascenes, the people of Damascus, used to stay in those two theaters to see what we call serious plays, plays that are based on international plays, for example, that use a classical Arab dialect. In Arabic, we have two distinct dialects, the spoken one and the written one. So the National Theater would adopt the classical ones. And normally, those theaters were free of charge. If not free of charge, it was like really very cheap to buy a ticket over there. And the seats were empty, the theaters were empty. On the other side, we have the commercial theaters who used movie theaters to show their plays, and the tickets were quite expensive, but they were full, completely full. And in this sense, we would say, what was the regime doing with the actual theater houses that it already existed in the country, while contemplating what should I do with this monument that I started, that I gave the order to build, but I'm not sure what to do with it. In a way, the question has two questions. The first one deals with the position of theater as an art in the country and as an art to the dictator, let's say. And the second one, the theater as a physical building and its position and its meaning in the city itself. I will start from the second question. Syria is not quite different from what happens all over the world in terms of theater buildings and the use of theater buildings in the city and the city planning of theater houses. We had, like everywhere, the theater districts. Everywhere where we go in Europe and in North America, we have a theater district where you have a street and some theaters, some of them really big houses and some of them for off mainstream. So the movie theaters I was talking about and the two theaters I'm talking about are in this theater district. What happened is the regime, the country, among them were the theater houses. Can you hear me? It's saying your internet connection is unstable, but it feels like everyone is hearing me. So I will.
No, we can. You broke up.
Okay. I trust your gestures, not the internet comment. And those. Oh, thank you. And the theater houses, the national theater houses that the regime really supervised, were ironically what we call basement theaters. They were 2 floors down. The refurbishment, the actual health quality of being there was completely bad, humid, and sometimes if you don't have electricity, people will suffocate. As well, you go to the private theater houses that were cinema houses. The regime could not really nationalize those, but it could take 33% of the shares, and then it could interfere with the policies, whether the policies that are related to the repertoire or the processes that are related to the refurbishment. So it made obstacles not to refurbish those theater houses, not to make it appealing. And while I was working on it, I was surprised, now my Syrian friends will be surprised as well, that the regime allowed every single play written by a Syrian playwright to be printed and shown in the country. I'm talking until the end of Hafiz Asad Ryan. It was only one play that was censored, and it has a story. Actually, my father wrote this play, and I heard so many stories about it because it was canceled on the opening day, which is quite strange. If you want to censor a play, you would censor it from the moment they send the text to the what we call the censorship committee. They will stop it right away, or on the first week, in the first week of the rehearsals, the censorship committee would come and would evaluate the play, and then they say whether it's permitted or censored. But this play it had like a story of the army coming and surrounding the theater and the secret police coming. So they stopped the play on the opening night. Apart from this play, everything was permitted, and that was against what we believe of a dictator, how a dictator would treat a critical tone that is delivered in theater. And then while working more on socialist dictatorship, I just found that every dictator needs to know what their people are talking about. when a regime controls all mediums in terms of newspapers, television programs, when they censor books and movies that are easily distributed, theater was the place, the safe place to monitor what the people actually talk about. So in a way, the regime, any dictator would need another discourse to fill the abstraction of vague slogans normally. And secondly, we need to know what people are talking about. And I wouldn't rely on reports from the secret police to know what's the interaction, how the interaction goes between the citizens. So in a way, my argument was that the plays were permitted to be shown, but the audience were prevented from going to theater. It is so normal to see a play. I'm talking about two theaters, one about 250 seats, the other one 550 seats. And it's so normal to see a play with 15 audience members, and the play will go on, sometimes even 5. Sometimes you have popular plays in the National Theatre where the house is completely full, but the norm is that the actors on stage are more than the audience in the auditorium. That's the norm back home, especially in the 70s, 80s, 90s, mainly in the 80s. And what was the tactics, the adapted tactics to allow the plays to be presented but prevent the audience from watching it? First of all, refurbishment. It is really a miserable experience to go to theater. Then you have the arrest. People will be suspicious about those venues where intellectuals would go and would discuss things that go beyond what is permitted in totalitarian regime. And another observation, which is quite a trend nowadays in theater studies talking about theater houses, I found out cafes were treated differently in theater houses. And those two theaters at the National Theatre, they had two cafes that were completely ruined. And the bigger one, they replaced the cafe with a man sitting next to a tap. And he opens the tap for you, and the tap has some hot water, and he puts some tea back to you, and then he gives it. And this is the social part of the theater. No chairs, no tables, no nothing. The other one had a smaller cafe, but it went into a complete, really miserable situation. So a theater would be a place you go inside and you leave quickly. Don't make any social interaction, any social debates, any intellectual comments after the play. So what I need from this play is to be shown, to know what is the daily interaction, what are the main concerns and main issues that the people deal with. But I don't want these comments to be spoken about, to be discussed. In the meantime, the regime built what we call Arab culture centers. Arab culture centers are buildings. I will show you an example of, I will share my screen to show you an example of the, first of all, I will show you the basement theaters. This is Al Hamra, the bigger one. If we go here, can you see it? You can see it. So you see the stairs going down, and then you turn right, and there are more stairs to go down. So it's actually two, 3 floors under the ground. This is the bigger one. The other one is Al Qabbani, which is another, the one that was bought from a wealthy family. If you can see it now.
This one we don't see.
You don't see the other one?
Mhm.
Let me check. Can you see it now? Screen sharing has stopped as the shared window is closed. All right, so I need to share everyone by. Um, Now you can see it, I suppose.
Yes.
Yes. So this is the other small theater, which is again 2 floors down, and then we had what we call the Arab Culture Center. The Arab Culture Center is one of the most bureaucratic cultural venues. Arab Culture Centers are concrete buildings, very poor equipments, and they run the most boring activities ever. So people would go to attend a speech by an official, or sometimes a new poet would read his poems, and the publicity is really bad. But what's so interesting about it is that these Arab culture centers were distributed in every single village or neighborhood in the country. So by 1990s, late 1990s, Syria had more than 450 Arab culture centers. In the time that where the regime did not open any theater house. So all the theater houses that existed before the regime, and what was built was the Arab Culture Center. Arab Culture Centers, I will show. Definitely, they are full of photos of the rulers. Um, this is one of them. Actually, this is in my village, from my village. Can you see it? Yes. This is one, and this is another one from the inside. This is in Damascus, and this is the most prestigious one. This is, can you see it?
This one, no. The second one, no.
The second, stop share. This is the second one. This is the most prestigious culture center in the country. Very poor equipped. It feels like as if we are attending a meeting by the ruling party in there. So those were the techniques the ruling regime took to isolate people from theater. So in the meantime, the opera house was waiting for a decision. And that was, to my opinion, that was the main predicament by facing Hafiz al-Assad. What to do with this huge monument that costs about, now if we talk money, because the Syrian currency dropped, but it costed about $50 million back in the time. So what to do with it? Should we leave it to the same tactics of neglecting it, of not refurbishing this huge monument, and to make it sink in the corruption and the bureaucracy of the state, or as a state of exception, as a state of emergency, should we give this building an exceptional position? And the answer was unclear, to my opinion. And that was one of the main reasons what to do with this building. It is quite shameful to have, like, the main theater and the opera house has about 1,500 seats. It will be really disastrous to have 10 people attending a play in a hall that hosts 1,500. It'd be acceptable when it's 250, but 1,500. And so what kind of plays to be presented there? What kind of, is it for commercial theater where people would eat seeds and will treat the venue as Europeans and North Americans were treating theater back in the 19th century, when it was shown in the pubs and in the bars, and they go to watch Shakespeare and shout and drinking their beer? No, Is it a serious theater that took place in the early 20th century in Europe and North America, where it became very serious, where it became so much engaged with academia, with intellectual thinking as well? The answer was unclear. Then it was open 2004 when his son succeeded the father. The son Bashar worked so much on public appearance. People would see him now and then eating in a popular restaurant or going to theater. He used to go to theater a lot, and to the serious theater and the other stream, the commercial one. So his presence was there, and he opened the Opera House in 2004. But what to do with the building again? It possessed an exceptional tactic that it had a direct link to what we call the palace or the presidency house. Orders or communication would go to the palace, and it wouldn't go to the bureaucratic process that normally control the theater production. So it is subordinated to Ministry of Culture, but it can bypass the Ministry of Culture to reach what we call the palace. The same technique was used with the artists. Artists were received by the palace by Bashar Assad and his wife, and many of them were, how to say it, were invited to come to the palace if they want their projects to proceed. And it's a whisper in the ear. They would tell them, don't go to the bureaucracy of the state because it's corrupt. Come to us if you want your projects to proceed. In a way, the artists were against their national institutions, and the palace became the judge between the artist and the institution. Now, the opera house was built same like Europe in the Renaissance, when the theater and the opera house replaced the cathedral, and it occupied the major square in the capitals and the cities. Emperors and kings would build theater houses in actually the main squares, whether it's in Paris and London and Munich or in Berlin. You see them. The same strategy was adopted with the opera house, but the square it occupied was the most sensitive square in the country, and it is the square where all the military coups in Syria took place. So this square is surrounded by very sensitive governmental institutions, the headquarters of the television, the headquarters of the military, the what we call the National Library. It's called Al-Assad Library, and it used to be the only five-star hotel. Then we had more five-star hotel, the Sheraton Hotel, and the opera house. So in each corner you have, apart from the hotel, in each corner you have a very sensitive governmental institution that had a huge statue of Hafez Assad, the previous president, a huge statue, and it is quite oppressive square. No one would dare to park their car there, for example. So to think sometimes of monuments, we think whether the monument influenced the city or does the city influence the monument itself. In the Syrian case, it was the second one. The opera house did not really influence the city, but its position in this square was influenced by the sensitivity of this square. People would go inside the opera house being searched, we go there as if we're going to a military base. And in there, my paper on the opera house, which was published at the Cambridge New Theatre Quarterly, I opened the paper talking about fights that happened inside the opera house. the fights between the artists and the officials over there. Some of them went to prison for claims. Some of the artists went to prison, few. But it was so normal to see physical fights in there. And this was the case, how it treated the intellectuals, the actual building. Now, when you talk about normal theater goers, they feel that they are oppressed over there. They can't, if they order a taxi, they should jump off the taxi quickly and run inside, being searched, and go in a total respectful manner inside the building. The building had windows, but the balconies would not look at the square. It would look at the backyard. And the backyard is where the Drama Institute, where I studied, and some of my colleagues here, I can see, studied over there as well. So there is nothing to see in terms of, you can't look at the military base. You can't look at the television organization. The same observation, there were like many cafes and restaurants inside the interior design specified that here we have 2 cafes and a restaurant. Those will never open. No one saw them functioning. So in a way, the same tactic happened. People come inside and leave quickly. And now you have to leave quickly, not because of the poor status of the actual theater. No, it is very clean. The theaters are really massive, fully equipped. But now you have to leave because you are in such a sensitive area, and the ushers will shout at people, kicking them out. And they would turn off the lights. Okay, the play finished, just leave. And once you leave, you can't stay outside the theater. Normally people would stay outside the theater. They have to leave because it's such a sensitive square. So people would scatter again. In a way, it functioned as it used to function in terms of theater and its audience, but it has an exceptional position with the ruling regime. Now we have a hotline, I would say, between the institution and the pulse. And this may, some friends would say that they who worked at the Opera House, or they had events at the Opera House. I myself organized some events over there. We treat it as if it is a military base. And we would be very scared of any report being made against us. Not really scared because at the time as well, the tone was a bit brave in terms of fighting back, okay? And this is how it reached sometimes to actual physical fights between prominent filmmakers, prominent theater makers, and the ushers. And people would roam. How much time do we have? 5 minutes?
I was just about to say, yes, we're almost out of time. A few minutes perhaps to wrap up.
Exactly. I'm there. People would roam between the 2 options, whether to call it the Opera House or whether to call it the Al-Assad House. Officially, it's called Al-Assad House. But what we taxi drivers actually call it the National Theater. Everyone in Syria calls it as they want. We in the Drama Institute, we call it the Opera House. But when the demonstrations and the protests started in 2011 in Syria, it was another exceptional building during that period, because Bashar al-Assad chose this building to give speeches twice, while he went only once to the parliament, and he went only once to a military base. And he gave more than 10 speeches in the first year, let's say, or less. 2 of them were in the Opera House or in Al-Assad House. Al-Assad House itself became a target for the rebels, and it was bombed. It's another picture. Oh, I should have shown you. Right, here is the Opera House, how it looks, and the sensitive square. You can see it now. And then it became a target for the rebels, and it was targeted many times actually while we're teaching there, while we were attending performances. And the question was proposed, are the rebels bombing another institution that oppressed them, or are they bombing an institution? You can see it, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Or it's a public sphere that will influence us as citizens. Like, who are you bombing? Is it an asset property or the people property? A question that's still unanswered up until now, probably. I left Syria around 2013, where I encountered many of those bombings while I was there. And the question was there, like, why he chose, I answered why he chose the Opera House to be one of the main buildings, and then it became a target in the war that is going on in Syria. I will stop here. I hope there are so many questions. Definitely, you can look at this paper at the New Theatre Quarterly, Cambridge Press. It's called The Opera House in Damascus and the State of Exception. The original title was The Mysterious Case of the Opera House, why it was ordered to be built and why the order was not to complete the construction. Hopefully I gave some answers of this riddle.
Thank you so much, Ziad.
Thank you.
For joining us today and for your presentation. We have a good half hour for questions and answers, and I have a feeling it's going to be very full. You've left us with both a large overarching question and then several smaller questions, but also a series of really poignant images. And I thought maybe I could draw attention to just a few of them before I turn the floor over to my colleagues here for questions. So you've left us with a very large question, this question of how totalitarian regimes relate to theater, to the practice, to the artists, but also to the buildings themselves. And in relation to that final kind of sub-question, you've also left us with a series of really key images. Suffocating basements, auditoriums originally designed as movie theaters, but later converted to function as theater or performance spaces. Unused cafes built into these institutions, and then stalled construction projects that are stalled for the length of multiple decades that stand in the kind of monumental heart of a city like Damascus. So I will stop our recording here.